Okay, thank you. I'm so excited about this tonight. This is an incredible opportunity. I have to tell you all, my book club, my other book club, read Dispatches from Pluto probably a year and a half ago, and we were recently finally all got back together after COVID, after we'd all been vaccinated, and we were talking about your new book, Richard, and we were so excited. And I thought, I will randomly see if he will join us for one of our book club meetings. And I love his answer back was, no, I don't really do these, but why not? And so thank you for joining us tonight. Sarah Lee, thank you for leading fabulous discussion as always.
Thank you.
And I'm going to turn it over to you to go because I know you have a lot going. I just asked at every point, I don't mind with videos on, but please keep muted during the discussion until we do Q&A.
And Sarah. we will open it up to Q&A pretty quickly. I am Sarah Lee Terry Woods. I work for Joyce McDaniel with volunteer work in the Women's Political Collaborative of Tennessee, which Joyce will tell you about before we close tonight. And quick introduction to Richard Grant. He was born in Malaysia, lived in Kuwait as a boy, and then moved to London. He went to school in Hammersmith and received a history degree from University College London. He is the author of many fabulous books, including American Nomads, God's Middle Finger, Into the Lawless Heart of the Sierra Madre, Crazy River, Dispatches from Pluto, which was a bestseller, winner of the Pat Conroy Southern Book Prize, and picked by the Parnassus Book Club, and more importantly, by Joyce McDaniel's Book Club. And tonight we are discussing
Sarah Lee, you've gone mute.
Yeah.
Now?
There you go, sorry.
There we go.
One interview that I read about you, Richard, what you said a couple of sentences with a guy named Dan Holmes book, and the interview was either in a Memphis paper or somewhere in a Mississippi magazine, that the South was basically settled by a bunch of surly Scot Irish that have always hated central authority, then put a civil war on top of that. And it seems like Southern culture encourages idiosyncrasies and eccentricities. I'm sorry, I can't speak. Anyway, as you say, Southerners are a storytelling people, which gotta agree, living in the South all my life, I think you nailed it. So how did you get people to talk to you?
I think well, for the Natchez book, a lot of people had read that Dispatches from Pluto, and most of them had liked it. And I think that they thought that A, I would give them a fair shake, and B, they enjoyed the attention. You know, Southerners are a storytelling people, but they don't mind outsiders telling stories about them if they're not mean. And I think they just thought I was going to give them a fair shake, and I think they felt flattered by the attention too.
Nothing to do with your British accent.
Well, I like to think that I'm more than my nationality, you know.
Well, you're a world traveler.
I'm a pretty easy guy to talk to, and I've been a traveler all my life, and so I'm just used to being places where I don't belong, and I have a lot of curiosity about the way people think and the way that they live, and I think people respond to someone with genuine curiosity about them, and I think people can sense that my curiosity is genuine.
Tell us a little bit about why and how you became a travel writer and supported yourself doing that for various magazines and then the Smithsonian, etc.
Well, let's see. I got this history degree in London, and I didn't want to pursue any more career in a university, and there wasn't really anything I wanted to be. My main plan was to just get out of England and have some adventures. And I got a job as a security guard, and I saved some money, and I got to New York, and I got to Philadelphia. I was a house painter for a while, and then I started traveling around America. And while I was traveling around America, I started writing letters back to a friend of mine in London. And he started working for a magazine. He said, look, if you clean up these letters a bit, I can pay you money and publish them. And I was like, well, that sounds like a good way to keep traveling. So yeah, for the next 5 years or so, I was pretty much a nomad. I didn't have an address. And I traveled around America and Mexico, and I wrote magazine pieces and kind of eked out the shoestring living. And then gradually the magazine pieces turned into, I had all this stuff in my notebooks I didn't know what to do with, and then that turned into my first book, and it's just kind of kept rolling on from there.
Well, that's the way.
I have a nearly 6-year-old daughter who's going to burst through this door.
Good.
Probably in about 20 minutes, because she hasn't seen me for a while. But I try not to travel so much since she arrived.
Good. Well, we'll look forward to that. We're a very kid-friendly place. Okay, let's talk about this book. Let's start first of all. Tell us about these two people that are on the cover. How did they get selected?
This is the only book cover of mine that I actually really like. These are both characters in the book. The black guy is named Sir Boxley, and he is an activist and an eccentric and a Civil War reenactor who dresses up in the uniforms of the US colored troops. And there's a lot of people in Natchez who like to get dressed up in antique costumes and impersonate the dead. And I was kind of interested that this crosses racial lines. The woman is Miss Betty, as everyone calls her, Miss Betty Jenkins. She lives in an antebellum home. She's a senior figure at the kind of most well-to-do garden club. And she also runs a tugboat business on the Mississippi River. There's a lot of very strong, take charge women in Natchez. It's about as close to a matriarchy as anywhere I've ever been.
I think I got the feeling the men got to write the checks.
Yeah.
Fill out checks.
Yeah. But the women actually, I mean, they control a lot of the tourism economy, and the women are in control of large sums of money too, or larger sums of money. And during the Depression, when Natchez was in decline, it was the women of the garden clubs who thought up the idea of the pilgrimage, which really saved the town from ruin and generated its tourism industry, which has kept it going pretty much ever since. It was all women that did that.
Well, I think when I read this, I really enjoyed the intrigue, which we'll get back to, between the garden clubs.
Yeah.
Factions with that. What they do to each other makes politics look pretty tame, as far as some of the things that they do. And I think when you talk to us about when you shared your story of going into Stanton Hall, I think on page 16, one thing I wish I'd had is like a picture of a younger woman crouching down awkwardly so these women line up against a wall to receive. Is that what we're seeing in these? They don't get younger people have to meet them at eye level.
Yeah, that was my first night in Natchez, and there was a line of dowagers seated on these antique chairs, and then a line of younger women sort of came in to pay court to them. But since the elderly dowagers were not going to stand up, these women would get into these really supplicating, they were kneeling down or crouching awkwardly, and some of them were wearing dresses that made it hard to do that. And I was just standing there with like my eyes on stalks, like looking at this thing and watching the watching the kind of the power just sort of drip off the end of the lady's fingers, and these younger women trying to grab a piece of that power and engineer a little rise in their social status within the garden club. And the older women were incredibly graceful and poised, but they could also just cut somebody dead with just like, you know, a minute little eyebrow movement. You could see the woman wince, like, oh no, Miss Betty, like, cut me.
Right. If you ask for red wine, I'm sure in Stanton's call.
And then this one poor woman who was doing the awkward crouch supplication maneuver. There's no red wine there because of these antique cream carpets, but she accidentally knocked over a glass of Coca-Cola on the floor right in front of, I think she's dead now, the woman that, I forget her name, anyway, one of these very poised dowagers. And I think I put it in the book, I thought they were going to take her out in the back gallery and garrote the poor woman. She's desperately at the stain napkin.
That went down in family lore, and perhaps that woman's daughter did not, or son did not get to be in the court.
I mean, her granddaughter will probably get harassed about that.
So I did not know that in the 2000s that tableaus and pageants like this were still going on. I just was like, just couldn't believe it. I mean, I knew what they were because I read French history and some historical novels, but I didn't know they still did that. So how did you keep a straight face the first time you saw one of these in action?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty extraordinary spectacle, you know. I mean, I never saw the unreconstructed pageant, which was just a sort of naked celebration of the Confederate South. The version I saw that they'd made a kind of awkward attempt to be more inclusive with Black history, but it was still a cringe, you know. There were still people prancing around in Confederate uniforms and hoop skirts, but they tried to kind of be honest about slavery at the same time, which kind of made everything worse in a way. It just really should have been dragged behind a barn and put out of its misery.
Well, I love the way you started out with the book talking. You're going to have to pronounce the name of the prince who became a slave, whose life you paralleled.
Yeah, Abdul Rahman Ibrahima, or just Ibrahima, as I called him in the book.
Ibrahima.
So yeah, this was, you know, this was not an easy book to write. It's like with the Pluto book, there was an obvious narrative. I'd moved into this place knowing nothing, and you know, it was a story about trying to understand this place I was living in. I had skin in the game. I kind of bought a house, and that gave it some obvious narrative energy. But with Natchez, I just showed up as a visitor there and got interested and kind of collected these experiences and pieces of knowledge and interviews, and I kind of felt like I needed a story to tell, and it couldn't be my story because I was just there as a visitor. And then I found out about this West African prince who was enslaved there, and I was just thought it was an incredible story. And I was like, well, I'm just going to use this story just to give the book some storytelling energy, you know, like, because it didn't have any. I couldn't find a way to sort of make any suspense in the book without using his story. So I was just kind of amazed by the story, and B, thought it would be a useful device.
I think the whole parallels of comparing the landed gentry and these mansions that are built on slavery with the story of a slave, you know, the story of a young man who's a prince, you know, who's sold and comes over here, and then his journey to try to go back, and his family is, I mean, it's incredible. And this man, Sir Boxley. Yes, his taking you, or you're going to the place where the actual auctions of slaves take place.
Yeah.
I don't understand why that isn't like a huge national monument with a living history saying this is what this looked like.
Well, they've got big plans for it. The National Park Service have taken over the Forks of the Road slave market site, and they've got pretty ambitious plans because, you know, the second biggest slave market in the South, it should have a bigger monument than it does. But on the other hand, the biggest slave market in the South was in New Orleans, and there's nothing there. There's just a little plaque on the wall about that big.
I don't think there's a lot in Newport, Rhode Island. I don't think they have a lot there either. You
Yeah,
know, all
maybe there's, I don't know what they have in South Carolina, but yeah, there's nothing. It's a hotel in New Orleans. It's the Omni Hotel. That was the site.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm hoping that the woman who runs the National Park Service in Natchez is named Kathleen Bond. I quote from her some in the book. She's a very smart and kind of sensitive person. I suspect that she'll do an excellent job.
Good. A lot of living history that we need. So can you tell us then a little bit about your writing process? Because again, The Deepest South is such a good book. You go to Stanton Hall and you see all of this. You're a relatively newcomer. You're going to one of the garden club's homes.
Yeah.
Then how do you remember all of that and then write about it to make the reader feel like you're there, you know, and you're seeing everything that's happening?
So yeah, I just wrote about my first day in Natchez. You know, I just got invited down by this woman, Regina Charbonneau, who, you know, I met at random and got along with, and she just invited me down. The first thing I saw when I got into town was that this had been the biggest slave market, and I was kind of really affected by that. And then then I go into this 1700s tavern, and there's like amazing food and wine, and like lots of gay people very much at ease and very interesting conversation. And I was like, we're in like a little town in the middle of nowhere in Mississippi. And then I start seeing these huge, opulent antebellum mansions. And then, you know, I go into Regina's house, and there's a big picture of her son wearing a Confederate uniform. And I thought, well, what's going on here? I was just really puzzled. And then she took me to this ball, this garden club ball at Stanton Hall, which, you know, you can compare it to the White House. That's how big and impressive it is. It's an entire city block. And then I was watching the dowagers on the chairs. I was within about 3 hours of being in Natchez, I was like, I want to write a book about this place. So that night I went back to my room in the old slave quarters at Regina's house, and I just wrote down in my notebook everything that I'd seen and heard that I could remember. And that's pretty much what I did the whole time in Natchez. For some interviews I used a tape recorder, but I was mainly just scribbling notes the whole time.
And people would talk to you.
What do you say?
I said, and people would talk to you.
People would talk to me, yeah. And especially with a little drink taken, you know.
I noticed there's a lot of that, and the people you write about the descendants, the children, grandchildren, whatever, of these active women, members of these garden clubs, who are trying to earn points so that their children can be selected for certain roles in this.
Yeah, it's very complicated. It had to be explained to me over and over again before I kind of understood the full complexity of this system. And it was hard to explain in print too. I mean, it's so involved. So the ultimate purpose of the garden clubs, apart from trying to achieve dominance over each other, is to preserve all these antebellum homes in Natchez that are there because Natchez was unionist during the Civil War. Even though all its wealth was built on slavery, most of the millionaires there were unionists, partly because they'd been born in the North, most of them, partly because they had national business interests, they had railroads and banks, and partially because they were convinced that the South would lose the war and be destroyed. And so they voted against secession, and they didn't fight when the Union army arrived, and they allowed the Union officers to use their mansions as military headquarters. And so that's why those mansions are still there, that the army were grateful and left them alone. I mean, there were Confederates in Natchez, but compared to Vicksburg, just up the river, a completely different story. And people today from Vicksburg are very, very resentful of people from Natchez because of what happened during the war. I remember talking to a guy from Vicksburg who said, "There's only one thing you need to know about Natchez." I was like, "What's that?" So they surrendered twice.
Not stupid.
All right, we have a visitor.
Good.
Isabel, I'm talking to some
Hi, Isabel.
book fans from.
Hello from Nashville.
They read my book and they want to talk to me about it. How are you doing?
Good.
That's important. I hope you've had a good break, doing fun stuff. So can you tell us a little bit, the people who are going to start this book, tell them a little bit about what the garden clubs, a little bit about who they are and why there's such a rivalry.
Okay, let me, Isabel, I will, I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, darling. All right.
I know she wants to hear this.
Okay, so I was trying to explain. So the garden clubs were set up both to run the tourism that goes through the antebellum homes. It's very gauche to call them mansions, by the way. They're homes. And Natchez, a home is something that was built before the Civil War, and a house is built after the Civil War, and no one uses the word mansion. Anyway, so two purposes: to run the tourism through these antebellum homes and to preserve the antebellum buildings, which costs a lot of money. Now, to do all the fundraising to save the buildings, you need an army of volunteers. And the garden club women are the volunteers that work on this historic preservation. Now, there's also this peculiar theatrical piece to this called the tableau, which is a kind of musical theatre celebrating Natchez history, and it's performed by children and young people. And the more volunteer hours that a mother logs with the garden clubs, the better the role that her child gets in the production. And this is also the better role that the child gets in the production, kind of the more social status accrues to the family. I told you it's very involved. Now, in the 1930s, there was one Natchez Garden Club doing this, and then there was a bitter split. The Battle of the Hoop Skirts, they called it. And the Natchez Garden Club divided into the Natchez Garden Club and the Pilgrimage Garden Club. And they each had their own antebellum homes, and they started feuding with each other. They were putting chains around each other's doors so the tourists couldn't get in. They were flinging lawsuits at each other's. Women who'd been high school friends were no longer speaking to each other. They would try and sabotage each other's. When the tableau, the kind of musical theatre part came on, one club would bring out its king and queen, and then the other club would try and sabotage them by feeding laxatives to dogs before they went on stage, scrawling graffiti into pianos, talking trash, spreading gossip and rumors. This is still going strong to this day. It's been this is a multi-generational feud that Natchez women like have inherited from their grandmothers through their mothers to the present day.
And I was surprised because of the people the younger people that are in college that want this to continue and want to tell the fiction story, of a romanticized Gone with the Wind type thing,
Yeah,
they want to continue this.
That was the tradition for a long time, there was this kind of selling this Gone with the Wind fantasy through both the pilgrimage, which is the tour of the homes, and through the tableau, the musical production. And then, so just before I got there, Greg Iles, the thriller writer, he tried to modernize it, give an honest accounting of the city's history, saying, look, we're built on slavery. We bought and sold human beings here by the tens of thousands. All these mansions, you know, and also, I mean, there was also a lot of very impressive Black historical figures that came out of Natchez, and he included them. Forgetting the names right now, but some of the
Richard
first
Wright.
during Reconstruction, yeah, Richard Wright, the novelist, and some of the first Black congressmen and senators came out of Natchez. But so you've got this kind of, there's also a complicated kind of class nuance to understand about this, because the kind of older, more aristocratic members of the Garden Club are more open to modernizing the production and having Black performers and including Black history than the more kind of Araviste social climbing women that are coming in, and they want the kind of glory of the old days, the thing they envied when they were small children, they want for their children. And the fact that it's all being changed and is now politically correct or whatever is not appealing to them. They kind of want the thing that they want all the nostalgia and the Gone with the Wind kind of romance and all this stuff about slavery, and having Black performers in there, they were not happy about either.
Well, I saw you quoted one of the leaders in one of the Garden Clubs saying, we had our family had no slaves. We had some field hands who were servants, and we loved them. So, I mean, that's why I thought it was so great.
You no doubt heard that many times.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so great that you were paralleling the story of the prince who was a slave and later his descendants, and what has happened in that particular family. I think, well, I did watch your interview with Greg Iles, that Square Books.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which was really good, and listening to his interaction. And I think he said Chesney Doyle, the person he brought in to write the actual history of what went on that's not romanticized, script was totally thrown out. And she said her first writing experience was like diving into a blender, you know, when she was trying to work with these people. So that's the other thing that really
just to set this in context, I mean, it's so involved, and you know, people are weeping and crying and losing their minds with anger, and but this is in this town of 15,000 people, like in the middle of, like, I mean, it's 2 hours from anywhere. It's so isolated and small, but if you live in there, it feels like the universe. So I mean, this is all like front page news and drama. And people 50 miles away couldn't care less, you know. But that's the weird thing about Natchez.
And these college
like
students,
its own universe.
The college students are coming home to participate and to be in to be royals and to be in the court in the 2000 teens. I mean, you know, this is not the 1940s.
Yeah, I mean, I think a
few years ago.
I think I first showed up there in 2015. I think. No.
So let me ask you another thing. This is a term on page 115, Richard, I had never heard used before, was gay neo-Confederates. That when you met this couple, and of course I had to go and look up this house and look at the other houses these men had done, and that was something I had not heard before, but you said there was more than one or two.
Yeah, there's another guy who just got married, and he not only does he like to parade around Natchez in a Confederate uniform, but he will get on a Nazi officer's uniform as well, and he'll be parading around in his Nazi uniform, but in a completely camp way. And yeah, I met several other people. There's one guy who's got 7 sons, and they're all named after Confederate generals. There's another guy who I don't think I put him in the book. I think I was worried about. There was sort of scurrilous behavior associated with some of the sons, but yeah, it was a new one on me. The gay Confederate thing. I just never saw it coming, which is on reflection kind of small-minded of me. I mean, why shouldn't should we expect gay people to, you know, side with all other oppressed people? Why shouldn't they be rich in their variety also?
I know, but sometimes we assume once you're disenfranchised, you know,
Yeah,
there's going to be a little more.
Experience discrimination, maybe you would think discrimination was a bad thing.
Despite their Union connections during the Civil War, they also had one of the biggest Klan rallies ever, right? Too,
Yeah.
You had written about. Did people talk openly about the Klan or their ancestors who were or are in the Klan to you?
A few did. I mean, again, it sort of, perhaps unsurprisingly, it seems to sort of break down into, you know, the old political divide. It's like people on the left side of the divide would talk about their slave-owning ancestors or the Klansmen in their lineage more than people who fall on the right side of that divide.
Did you ever think about putting photos in the book?
No, the publishers are against that. It jacks up the price of the book, and they don't like to do it. I think it would have been. I would love to do a book with photographs. I'm a photography fan. I'm no good at taking them, but I really appreciate photography, and
well,
that place is right for
absolutely
photography.
Someone is asking, what is the time frame represented in The Deepest South of All? Was this before 2016?
I'm trying to remember when I first got there. I know it was before all the kind of Black Lives Matter stuff
Okay.
got going. The people were already talking about that in Natchez. So when that conversation went national, I kind of felt like Natchez had been ahead of the game, because there'd been a lot of talk about, you know, what do we do about our Confederate past and tourism, and they've been talking about it for 10 years or so, the kind of conversation that was starting to happen in the rest of the country.
Hey, Shirley, can I ask a question before you go further?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So they are talking about it for 10 years prior to now, but were they changing?
They were on all the city like tourism brochures, they were including a visit to the slave market and the Museum of African American History and Culture. While I was there, that they had the first African American woman admitted to the Garden Club, but they'd been trying for years to kind of, one club had been trying for a long time to integrate, but she was the first woman that was willing to do it. And there'd been significant changes at Stanton Hall, which is the huge antebellum home run by the National Park Service there. The tour included a visit to the slave quarters and a pretty honest discussion about where the wealth came from that built the mansion. I mean, I think other places in the South had progressed further along the same path, but it was definitely, Natchez was on the path.
Did Kathy, is that the lady, the lady's name who restored the slave quarters in the Gold Mansion area? Did she become a member?
Not Kathy.
Sorry, I just forgot. I wrote her name down. She bought the house and restored it.
Debbie.
I'm sorry.
Debbie Cozy, yeah.
Yes. Did she become a member?
She did, yeah.
Which one, do you know?
To the Pilgrimage Garden Club, yeah.
So does that mean, do you think, Richards, there's only one Black woman who's a member of that?
Well, somebody's got to be first. I hope there'll be some more. I think it would really it would really kind of change things in the town. It would change the feel of everything a lot. If because there's an organization, there's kind of sorority of black women that kind of, you know, they're all sort of professional, quite successful women. They get together and they do fundraisers, and there've been attempts to kind of bring the two groups together, but it hasn't worked. But you know, it's not to say something like that couldn't happen in the future.
You share some of your experiences of playing Santa, being with all the Santas, and hanging out with the men, and it sounds like liquor flowed freely.
Yeah.
Were there any men of color included in the male activities?
Yeah, there were some. There was actually one in my car, a black lawyer who does it every year. There was a few, not that many. Yeah, it was funny because straight white men, you know, who supposedly run everything. It's like there was so much in the background in Natchez. It was women and gay men were kind of like in my foreground all the time, and any social setting, the kind of white guys would just sort of fade off into the background. The women would take center stage, or like the gay men would take center stage. And then this Santa parade, which is, I think, the only police escorted drunk driving event in America. Everyone piles into their cars with liquor, with cocktails starting at dawn, and they drive around town with a police escort, and they stop in, they drink more, they throw gifts out for children, and it's incredibly drunken. It has a police escort all the way. But this was the kind of one thing where the guys get to, particularly the straight guys, get to kind of like have their day in the sun, was this Santa parade, which has been going on since, I think, the 1930s or something.
So they've been able to retain control of that.
Yeah, my friend, I became good friends with this woman, Kerry Dix, and she tried to be the first woman on the Santa parade, and was shot down by her uncle. She did manage to sneak on one year, but she wanted to make it official.
I probably didn't want her sharing what was going on. You write a lot about the schools and the school system. Do you know if how's the Civil War taught in the public schools there? Is it the recent unpleasantness, or is it facts about this is fought over slavery?
I don't know, to be honest. I know it used to be the kind of the whitewashed version was taught, but I'm assuming that they couldn't get away with that anymore, but who knows?
Well, you should see what they're doing in Tennessee. You know, there's some facts we don't want to talk about, you know, here in our.
Can I ask another question real quick, please?
Yes.
So, Richard, when I started reading this book, I mean, I get so far in it, and I felt like I was reading it as you writing it, and going to in my inner brain going, what the hell? I mean, did you like go? I mean, first of all, if you hadn't had a British accent, you would probably never gotten into that initial party that you went to, which
not the way I was dressed.
Yeah, that's kind of sucked me in with oh, you've got a British accent. Come on, put your jacket on. You'll get in. Nobody will question it.
You know, I had to buy a tuxedo to do this book. I didn't own a tuxedo, but I just couldn't get where I needed to be without a tuxedo in Natchez.
But did you ever, like, I mean, were you like every day going, truly, what the hell?
Yeah,
this is really happening, and
I'm
living in a different, this really can't be happening.
No, every day it was that kind of through the looking glass feeling. Yeah, I mean, exactly. What the hell? What is this place? How did it get this way? Is this really happening? Yeah, and it was incredibly exhausting to report. I mean, they're very garrulous, the people there, black and white, and you would sit down to interview someone, you wouldn't get a word in for the next 6 hours, and they'd be telling these family stories and the family histories, the family trees. They were all tangled up with first cousin marriages and slaves getting impregnated, and it just made my head swim,
So did you ever get, I'm sorry, Sarah Lee, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did you ever get
questions?
Okay, hang on a second.
No.
Did you ever meet anyone that you went, after you had a conversation with it, that went, they get it. This is not how it should be.
Yeah, my friend Kerry, who's descended from William Dunbar, was one of the real millionaire kind of powerhouse slaveholders. And she's just her family tree is littered with suicides and incest and God knows what else. And she absolutely gets it. She was one of the most valuable people for me because she's from that, but she's got enough perspective that she can see how insane it is. She just calls Natchez like a giant open air insane asylum.
So I went to the Fist of Knowledge, as my friend Kathleen calls it. I went to the internet to look up, see what else I could find after I watched the Square Books interview, which I highly recommend, with Greg Iles. He's y'all are both great storytellers. And something came up in Natchez about the local library was going to have a discussion of your book. A two-part, part one, part two, and I couldn't find it online. So tell me about how this was received. Have you been invited for any signings or events there?
Let me just put in a word for if anyone wants more Natchez, the documentary Mississippi Madam about the brothel owner Nellie Jackson is really worth a look. Yeah, Mississippi Madam is made by two guys from Natchez. So yeah, the way my book was received. The ladies of the Natchez Garden Club were really not happy at being portrayed as the less aristocratic of the two clubs. And Regina got a really hard time she was a lot of people. I think there's 5 left that are no longer speaking to her, but when the book came out, I think about 20 or 30 people were either cut her dead or like publicly insulted her and me. I got, if you look at my at the book on Amazon, you can see some of the 1-star reviews from the Natchez residents who didn't like it, and there's also
we can fix that on this end.
Yeah, that's right. We can do that, and we
can fix that.
We'll have to buy Regina's cookbooks, to support her.
Yeah, she's a wonderful woman. Yeah, and then I was accused of having a political agenda, that I was some sort of left-wing activist, which is not true at all. But I think it's kind of died down now, and because there's not the bookshop in Natchez closed down, but there's a woman with a gift shop, and she's been buying a lot of signed books from me to sell in the store. And
I bet.
But for me, all the people that I liked in Natchez were really happy with the book. I got a wonderful letter from Debbie Cozy. She was the first Black woman in the Garden Club who had converted the slave quarters into a bed and breakfast. So she wrote me this wonderful letter. It seemed like most of the Black people there liked the book, and to my mind, it seemed like most of the smart white people liked it. And it seemed like apart from the ladies of the other club, as Regina calls it, she doesn't even like to say the name of it.
That's the other club. That's the
other club.
The Natchez Club. Is that right?
Natchez Garden Club. Yeah, she calls it the other club. Like you said the name, and like you might get a rash or something, and they call the Pilgrimage Garden Club the Pills.
wouldn't that be interesting if when there's intermarriage amongst those clubs, which
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure there is.
Yeah,
You know,
it'd be like
that does happen.
Old Miss or Mississippi State football, when you have like the mixed marriages.
Right. That's sort of like Tennessee and Vanderbilt here. You
Yeah.
know, we have a little bit of that. I really like the way you showed the region in both of your books about that Delta region, warts and all. I mean, you were so upfront about it. And I was amazed too with the tableaus and the kids coming home from college that people just sort of turn a blind eye to all the drinking, you know, that's going on too. It's just, and I have to admit, I went to YouTube to see what one of these things looks like, you know, to see what do they do with those hoops, you know, when they're not wearing them, where do they store them?
Okay, so they have a party for the hoops. So they're difficult things to clean. So they all what is it? They jump in the swimming pool with their hoops on. There's something to do with the swimming pool and cocktails and hoop skirts. So
of course there is.
I forget the details. Yeah, there's a lot less drinking than there used to be, but there's still by normal standards. I mean, like the ladies who receive the tourists at the homes and show them around and tell the stories about the China and the family history. They've got a cocktail called a Mr. Clean, and it looks like a glass of iced water, but it's iced vodka and lemon juice, and that's a Mr. Clean. I think it's a Natchez drink.
Obviously, it looks like the clubs have been or are segregated. What about the places of worship? Do you know, are those segregated in the Pluto area? Or
yeah, most of them are, but there's a couple that aren't. And there's also this Mission Mississippi that's trying to integrate the churches, and it's like, do you know? I think I wrote something about it in the book. Yeah, it's it's founded by a black pastor, and he's like, you know, we're all Christians, like we can't, you know, worship together, why not? And so they built this movement where it's a kind of Christian-led movement for racial reconciliation, and part of it is they go to each other's churches.
But isn't that like,
it's difficult for people though, because you know the black people get in the white church and they're like, where's the Holy Spirit in here? It's like it seems so quiet and orderly, and they don't feel the Spirit. And then you see the white people get in the black church and then they feel awkward. But I think it's a good thing. I think they should keep at it.
Joyce?
But I think that's not just Natchez, Mississippi. I've said all my life that the most segregated hour in the U.S. is 11 to 12 on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Because I think that's anywhere. I mean, I think that's, you know, I may go to probably the most integrated church in Nashville when we ever open back up. And a lot has to do is because I go to downtown Nashville. I'm in this literally in the middle of downtown Nashville, where a lot of my congregation is homeless, and we're about 50-50. But that's very unusual.
Yeah.
Very unusual.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, Natchez is just like a little kind of high strength distillation of a lot of American problems, frankly.
So what do you miss most about living in Pluto and living in Mississippi?
A lot, actually. I mean, there's a lot I like about Arizona, but people lack, they don't have good manners. they don't have that kind of graciousness, or there's a lot more rudeness out here. And then I think probably the thing I miss most of all is the storytelling, but also just the kind of conviviality and the sociability and the southern warmth. Yeah, it's not out here. I mean, there's this.
Why did you move?
My wife is from here, and her mother needs our help.
Okay.
And her brother just had a baby, and
For the very same reasons that the people come back to Natchez.
kind of, yeah, but it was more than that. It was, you know, we were living in Jackson, you know, Pluto, we really enjoyed living there. Then one thing led to another, and my wife got a job in Jackson. We moved to Jackson, and that was just, it was much more, the Delta is much looser. There's more ways to be there. Whereas Jackson felt very like narrow, and we just didn't fit in there, you know.
When you talk about the in Pluto, when you're describing going to the blues, the places that you find that are far away from where you're living, but the mixture of people and the relaxation, of course, the liquor flowing, but the enjoyment of music and talking and sort of letting your hair down. Have you found anything like that in Arizona?
No, ma'am. Have not.
Not none.
I've got some really good old friends that, you know, I've known for 30 years here in Tucson, and I love to get out on a hike in the mountains and the desert, and it's kind of politically, I think it's not as you know, it's a lot looser. To be honest, like one of the reasons I wanted to get out of Jackson was looking at the kind of teenage girls there, and thinking about my daughter like becoming one of them. It was so conformist. They all dress just the same and like do all the same things. As much you can be yourself a lot easier, I think, out here. The social pressure to conform, you know, are you going to State or Ole Miss? You know, are you going to vacation in 30A? And it was the conformity there was just I didn't want my daughter growing up in it.
Sarah Lee, we need to introduce him. I believe Eric and Jen Cole now live in Tucson.
Oh yeah,
Ed Cole's children.
Yes.
Yes.
Are they with us?
No, they're not on tonight, but we need to we
Yeah.
need to connect them because they need to do that. Sarah Lee, do you want to ever ask anybody to open up on photos to act, because we have about 5 to 6 minutes left.
Yes, yes, if you all want to turn on.
If anybody wants to turn on their videos, they may, and ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll make sure we're unmuted.
Somebody
Karen, I know you had a couple of things.
Karen has a question. Let me turn it over to Karen Litter.
Well, I'm just curious. I've loved both. I've read Pluto and the Deepest South of All, loved them both. And I like your sympathy for the people that you meet. I mean, you don't seem to, you give a fair presentation of each person and don't judge, which I really appreciate. And it gave me a lot of interesting insights into people, especially the Pluto book. But I'm curious if you see anything coming up about Arizona. I mean, you've written about travel your whole time, and
yeah,
there's a story in the fact that it's not so open.
Yeah, I'm not that interested in writing about Arizona actually, compared to Mississippi. I keep thinking that I'm going to come across something, and I mean, I just had spent a very interesting week on the Navajo reservation here with a bunch of Navajos. That was really interesting. But no, I'm actually I've got I kind of want to write another book about Mississippi. I've got this idea for a book about Mississippi history that I kind of want to get into, but whether I can sell it is the question.
I bet you can. You have a lot of fans and a lot of people that are writers that are fans. I'm sure that we get the word out. Have you ever thought about fiction? Yeah,
I've thought about fiction, but my agent told me to, under no circumstances, write a novel, because even a novelist can't sell novels right now.
I love it. Kathy Morgan, I see your hands up.
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say that we love you and we love both books. And we were just in Greenwood, and they have your books front and center in the Greenwood bookstore.
That's a great little bookstore, right? Turn right.
Yeah. Oh my God. I spent a lot of money there.
Good.
Yeah.
That's
But yeah, thank you for doing this.
spent, in my opinion.
Kathy Morgan is who told us about, she's in my other book club, who told us about your book and said, we need to read this book.
He was right.
Yep.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're very welcome.
Anybody else have, Judge Escobar, are you still on? Do you have any questions?
Judge, I have a noisy cat too. He's been very noisy tonight. Yeah.
As-
Yes,
Judge Escobar did another program for us recently and her cat meowed through the whole thing.
he or she participated. Yeah, things to say.
If anyone wants to know about my dog, since we're
Yes.
talking about pets, I had a story. If you Google my name and Garden and Gun,
Right.
there'll be a story about my dog and when she gate crashed a wedding in the Mississippi Delta.
That was absolutely great. So what kind of
She's
pets do you
13
have these
now.
days?
I've
Oh, you
got the
still
same
have
dog.
her?
Yeah, she's 13 and she's still picking fights with other dogs.
Well, the stories that you have about her on her farm, she just sounds fearless. Absolutely fearless. I mean,
So
armadillo. Thing.
Kathy,
Yeah, I was just going to say, so do you write regularly for Garden and Gun? That is probably my favorite magazine. And I was just thinking, I bet I read that article and didn't even realize it was
Yeah.
that it was you.
No, I pitched a few ideas to the editor about a year ago, and then he never replied. So I guess that's over for me. What I'm write regularly for Smithsonian Magazine these days, which is
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Awesome.
I've
So
got
do you-
request.
they put me on the masthead now, and I'm pretty much writing just for them.
so
Okay. Great.
did you lose any friendships in Natchez that you truly, at writing the book, that you question yourself about because you lost a friendship?
No, I didn't lose any friendships. I was really worried about that because friendships matter a lot to me, and it's an awkward position to be in when you become friends with the people that you're going to write about, but you've got your responsibility as a writer to write honestly. And so, yeah, I was really worried about that, but it thankfully didn't happen. I was even more worried about it in the Pluto book with the Thompson family.
I
And
love the Pluto book because when in reading the Pluto book with me, I read it as we have such a misconception about who we think people are, and the ones that it's what I always say doing political campaigns. And I had this conversation with somebody yesterday. I said, you're going to learn who your friends are, and it's not going to be the people you think it is.
yeah.
I love your Northern liberals out skeet shooting, the vegetarians, on one of your parties. I thought, oh, that's my husband. Yeah, that was good. Are you hunting any in Arizona?
You know what? I'm not. I don't. There was so many deer at Pluto, and the desert is a very lean environment. Everything is struggling to make it out there. We're in a drought, and I feel like, I can go to the supermarket here and buy meat. I think I'll just leave them alone.
Well, this has been absolutely great, Richard. I can't wait to see what you write next.
Yeah.
We'll
Don't know what that will be, but
we'll look forward to that and the Smithsonian and staying in touch with you. I'm going to turn it back.
Please stay in touch.
We will, and I'll turn it back over to Joyce.
Thank you again. Thank you so much for this. You are fascinating. I absolutely love your writing, your style of writing. I love the fact that you don't mind calling people out when they need to, but you do it in a most graceful manner. And I love that. For all of you all, we are back here on, I believe it's the 25th, Sarah Lee, am I?
2 weeks.
20 what?
2 weeks, I think.
In 2 weeks. Becca Stevens, who was the founder of Thistle Farms and Magdalene, is going to be here discussing her book that I just lost
Tea and Justice.
The Tea of Justice. Tea and Justice. So I hope you will join us back. Again, Richard, fabulous book. If for anybody who logs on that has not read it, go buy it, read it. It is incredible. And go buy the cookbook of Rita. Is that right?
Regina Charbonneau.
Regina. Go buy her
This-
cookbook.
She's a biscuit maker, Joyce.
You'll notice one thing about both my Mississippi books. I relied on female chefs as my
Right.
primary guides.
You
Go
did not
buy her
start-
book and
Maybe that's what I
support
need to
her.
find in Arizona is the right woman chef.
That's exactly right. You did not go hungry, which was another Southern trait. That ain't gonna happen.
Not
Thank
good.
you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.